Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted the sewer tunnel entrance from Warcry Catacombs. Here we go, so this is the sewer tunnel entrance, another great piece of terrain, and I primed this with the necrotic flesh from Army Painter. Once that was completely dry and I left it overnight, I put on the basilicarnum grey citadel contrast paint. I gave that a really good shake to make sure it's all mixed up, and then just working from the pot with a medium, fairly old brush, I just got to work giving that a complete coat all over the piece. The only bits I didn't cover here was that metal grate and the bones and skulls. So this is kind of in keeping with the colour scheme from the Catacombs book. And I want that kind of slimy, dirty, grimy dungeon floor look that looks kind of greasy and what you'd expect if there's a sewer nearby. This technique I discovered just when experimenting with different colours, and I put on a couple of layers of contrast paint over this necrotic flesh and really liked the result. There we go, that's that first coat done, and it's just enough to kind of still bring some of that necrotic flesh coming through, and I really like the texture that's given to the piece. Now we're going to put another layer of contrast paint, and this time it's snakebite leather. So I gave it a really good shake, and then for this first piece of the terrain I wanted to do that top circle of stones a little bit darker, just because it was more near the entrance tunnel, so I imagined more grime would build up there, and I just used it straight out of the bottle and put a kind of ring around the whole piece there. And I also looked at bringing it down, just trickling down 2 or 3 areas where I thought some of that extra gunk would start to form. And there you can see the different trickles of gunk running down, but we're going to carry on with the snakebite leather and just put it over the rest of the piece now. And so I took some technical contrast medium, gave that a really good shake, so it's just as important to shake this well as if the others. And then I take equal parts of contrast medium and equal parts of snakebite leather and mix the two together thoroughly. And I'm just using the top of an old plastic tub here, and this is the lid of my wet palette, but you could use any dry palette for this. A wet palette's not going to work because the contrast paint will seep through the paper parchment on top. So I wasn't sure how this was going to work out. I've never done this before with the contrast paint, but thinning down one part and leaving the other straight out of the bottle, I thought it would give an effect and keep it subtle. So we'll see at the end if it did make a difference and if you can tell. And there we go, that's starting to dry now, and you can't really see that much of a difference at this point, but I'm hoping when it dries it's going to look a bit better. But now I'm going to do the skeletons, and so with some contrast paint skeleton horde, I give it a good shake, and I'm just going to use this straight out the bottle and apply it generously with a citadel, just medium sized brush there. So straight out the bottle. I've wet the brush first, and I'm taking the paint and I'm putting quite a bit on, making sure to go in those eye sockets. I've noticed with these skulls you really have to put a lot in, otherwise it dries and it doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the eye socket. So I'm really putting a lot in and making sure it's going all into all the recesses where I want it to be. And that's the skulls done there, and while they're drying completely I want to bring those pots to life a little bit. And although I've just coated those in both the grey and snakebite leather, I still want them to be grimy, but I want to give them a colour of their own. So I'm going to use some contrast griffon orange, and this is going to be like a clay pot effect, but it's going to be in keeping with that grimy, grungy look. So again, just straight out the bottle for this. Not trying to be fancy. I mean, this terrain, I'm just looking at tabletop ready, and they're quite big pieces. If I'm doing miniatures, I'd be using a palette a lot of the time. But for this works just great. And now I moved on to the metalwork. And for this I wanted to give it a base coat of lead belcher. And again, a really good shake is so important with these paints. And with a wet brush, I just take it straight out of the pot again. And I put the paint on, starting where I want most of it to be, and then start spreading it out from there. Again, it's just tabletop ready terrain, so I'm not being too fussy here. And I'm making sure I go in from all the angles so that however you look at the piece, that metal is going to be painted on the insides and the outsides. So I let that metal dry and then moved on to a shabty bone, and I was going to use that to highlight the stonework. And so with a kind of decent sized brush here. I put the paint on, take as much as I can off on a paper towel, and then just lightly brush that on. And I'm making sure I'm brushing down and going along, going with the kind of flow of the piece and trying to get all the kind of cracks and details highlighted. I don't want this to be too strong because I really just want it to be grimy and dirty, but having a highlight is going to bring it to life. I'm going to take a bit more paint, load it up, brush it all off on that paper towel, and then just start applying it again from all different angles on that terrain piece. And now I'm going over all the skull, the pots, the stonework, everything. And this is Shabty Bones, a really nice colour for a highlight to bring all those textures and different components together. With the highlight done on the stonework, it's starting to look really cool now. And so it's time to add some shade to that metalwork. So I took Agrax Earthshade. You could use Nuln Oil, but I like the Agrax Earthshade for this because it's brown, and that's kind of going to tie it in with a grungy look. And straight out the pot again, just loading the brush, rubbing it off on the lid there so there's not too much, and then just start applying it quite heavily in all those areas. Really putting a lot on that lock, and on the hinges I'm putting a real big dollop in there and working it into all the recesses and going right up against the stonework. I'm not too bothered if this runs onto the stonework because that'll just add to the effect. And when that's completely dry, and that's really important to make sure it dries, I moved on to making this metal fit in with beneath the 8 points. So I wanted to add some rust, and I just took some of that contrast Griffhound orange that we used earlier on the clay pots, and I'm just going to apply little dots of that to kind of give an idea of rust. And I'm making sure it goes where rust would naturally build up on those hinges, on the rivets, and anywhere 2 bits of metal are going to overlap. And there you are, you can see I'm just putting little spots of it. I'm being quite careful here, not putting too much. If I put too much, I just rub a bit off with my finger. And then when that dries, it's going to be toned down a little bit and give a really nice effect. So adding this Griffhound orange, and then that's going to contrast against the greens and that kind of snakebite leather look. It's also going to tie it in to the terrain board that's got lots of orange in there, which also contrasts with the dungeon doors that I painted in that teal colour. So I'm really thinking about how this piece fits in with the board and the other pieces of terrain as I go along. And that's it, all done. I was really happy with how it turned out, and I really love the colour effect of the grimy stone. And I applied that over the pillars and the other brickwork of the set, and I think it works really well all together, especially in contrast with the dungeon doors you can see there in the picture. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback, and I hope this video helps you with your Warcry Catacomb terrain. I'll put a link in the description to my website that's got a free paint recipe for this piece, and I'll also put links in the description to all the paints I used. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope it helps you out. Please like if you like the video, subscribe for more Warcry content like this, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.